Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm back with another tutorial video. This time we are going to talk about the Syndicate and the actions that are available to them when they have a turn. So let's go ahead and just review their goals really quickly so that you know what you're aiming for with these operation options. When you are the Syndicate, you want to have more than 7 open casinos, and you also want to have more than 30 resources. So you need a bunch of casinos out there, you need them to be open, and you also need a lot of money. So make sure that that is on your mind when you're playing this game. You also want to keep an eye on everybody else's goals just to try to prevent them from getting to their goals before you can get to yours. But this is very much about you and what your options are if you're watching this video. So the Syndicate does share some actions with other insurgent factions, but I'm going to cover everybody separately. Everybody deserves their own video. So this might look familiar if you've been watching some of the other videos, and if not, well, some of these concepts will carry to other factions. But the first thing we're going to talk about is rallying. So your first operation is the rally operation. And the reason that you would do it is to grow your forces. So you definitely need some more dudes out on the board. We've got a few guerrillas up here who are not being put to their best use right now. And in order to get them out and into action, you need to rally them. Rallying can also allow you to hide guerrillas, which is good because if a guerrilla is activated, so if it's got symbol side up, then it is vulnerable to attack from other players. However, if the guerrilla is underground, hidden, then they are a lot safer and their position is more secure. Where can you rally? Well, you can rally in any province or city. So ECs are off limits, but any provinces and any cities are fair game for rallying some guerrillas. And how much does it cost? So unlike the government, which has varying costs up here, fortunately for you, as the Syndicate, things are a lot easier because basically you just pay 1 resource per space selected where you're going to perform this operation. So if you want to perform it in multiple spaces, you pay 1 resource each. If you're doing a limited operation and you can only do it in 1 space, or you just choose to only do it in 1 space, then it's 1 resource. Pretty cheap comparatively. And then basically all you're going to do is in each selected space, you're either going to place one of your guerrillas, or if the space has an open casino, you can flip all of your guerrillas who are present to their underground side. So for example, I could decide to place a guerrilla in any city or province on the board. So I can maybe decide I want to grow some presence here in Camagüey, and I would just pay 1 resource for that. Or, like, let's say that I have an activated guerrilla here and I want them to hide. There's an open casino here as well, so I could, instead of adding someone to the map, just push that guerrilla back underground. One thing to remember, however, is that rally looks a little bit different for the 26th of July and Directorio factions. So the rules I just gave you are Syndicate specific. Make sure you remember that going forward, because there will be limitations and some advantages for the other factions when they rally. The next operation that you can choose to do is march. And of course, marching is used to move your forces around. So if you want your forces to go from one area to another, you need to take a march operation. And in this case, the destination could be any space. But really what that means is any space that you already have forces adjacent to. So you can't move a guerrilla from here all the way over here, but you can absolutely move a guerrilla into a space that is next to them. And how much does it cost? Well, it costs 1 resource per city or province destination that you selected. And interestingly, ECs cost 0. So I can move Syndicate guerrillas into economic centers for free. And any other destination space for a march is only going to cost me 1 resource per destination. If I'm doing a limited operation, of course, I can only choose 1 destination, and that'll cost me 1 or 0 if it's an EC. Then you get to move any guerrilla pieces into an adjacent destination space. So you're choosing by destination, and then you're moving any adjacent guerrillas into that space. No one guerrilla, however, can move more than 1 time. So I can decide that I want to move my guerrilla over here into La Habana, and that's awesome, but I can't choose La Habana and then Matanzas as 2 different destinations and then move the same guerrilla over here. That's a no-no. I cannot do that. So you'll definitely want to keep that in mind. The other thing that's interesting is that your guerrillas are considered to move as a group if they go from the same origin space and into the same destination space. And that wouldn't seem like it's a really big deal, except there are cases where it is, and I'm going to tell you that right now. When you move guerrillas into a space that has cubes, Once the total piece count is bigger than 3 in a destination that has support or is an economic center, then it's going to force those guerrillas to go active. So let's do an illustration of what I'm talking about. Let's say that we're right here in Camagüey and that there are only 2 pieces here for the purposes of this demonstration. So the official rule is that if you're moving a guerrilla into a space with cubes, and that space either has support, which this one does, or if it's an economic center, then the guerrillas are going to be forced to go active. So right now my guerrillas are underground trying to sneak into the city, but once there's more than 3 pieces here, they have to go active. So the reason that guerrillas have to move as a group from one origin space to one destination space is that otherwise I could try to split these and be like, oh, well, this is 3 pieces. This guy stays underground. And then here's 4. Only this one has to activate. But that's actually not how it works. Instead, these guys move as a group. They both come in here, and then they both have to activate. So that's why that rule matters and why it's there. But those are the basic rules for marching. Essentially, you can pay 1 resource per destination space, and then you can move adjacent guerrillas into those destination spaces. Just be careful about whether it's a place with support and how many pieces are there, or else your guerrillas might end up exposed. Your next option for operations is the ever classy terrorism. You can perform a terror operation. Why would you do that? Well, you're going to do that to impact the support or opposition in an area in your favor. And then having a terror marker there also prevents other factions from manipulating the populace there as easily. So that's why you would do it. Where can you do it? You can do it in any spaces with an underground guerrilla. And that's one of the reasons why it matters whether your guerrilla is underground or activated. If they're activated, they can't do a terrorism. If they're underground, then they can act with that terroristic impunity, which will strike fear into the hearts of the people of whatever location you're in. And then how much does it cost? Again, it costs 1 resource per province or space selected, and it's free in ECs. So if I've got multiple underground guerrillas scattered across the map, I can do a terrorism operation, pay 1 resource per spot they're in, and commit terrorism in multiple locations on the map. So where do we want to do it? Let's do it here in Matanzas. There's passive opposition here, and maybe we want things to move a little more in that neutral direction. We are in a weird symbiotic relationship with the government as the Syndicate, because the Syndicate represents American, mostly, casinos and organized crime interests entrenched in Cuba. And so we're going to be using and abusing government power to keep ourselves safe. So opposition isn't necessarily for us. So we've got an underground guerrilla here in Matanzas. What we can do is, if we're going to perform terrorism here, we activate 1 friendly underground guerrilla in each selected space. So we would activate this guerrilla. We are in a province, so we'd place 1 terror marker. And then we'd move support or opposition 1 level towards neutral. So let's go ahead and take this away. And now we are in neutral. And then the other option is, let's say that we didn't do it in a city or a province. Let's say that we did it in an EC. So let's rewind. If we're in an EC and we want to commit terrorism, it's not called terrorism. Instead, it's called sabotage. So you activate your guerrilla and you do sabotage. And this impacts how much resource gain the government's going to get during the propaganda phase. So one thing that's kind of interesting about terrorism is that you can stack terror markers. So there can be more than 1 terror marker in a city or a province. There can only ever be 1 sabotage marker in an economic center. So once there's a sabotage marker there, you might as well not do too much more because it's already sabotaged. However, if somehow you get all of the terror/sabotage markers out already on the map, you do not place any more. There's just a max on the amount of terrorism and sabotage that Cuba can handle in this game. So that is terror, a terror operation. And then the Syndicate has 1 special operation all its own, and that is called Construct. So you might remember that your goal is to open a bunch of casinos. Construct is the operation that allows you to do that. So if you want to build a new casino, you need to take a Construct action. You can do this in any city or province that is controlled by the government or by the Syndicate. So it doesn't matter how the people feel about you. What matters in this area is raw control. So for now, places that are eligible for further placement are Pinar del Rio, because it's in Syndicate control. We could do another casino in Havana. We could do Las Villas, because it's controlled by the government. We could come to Camagüey, government control, or we could come to Santiago de Cuba, also in government control. So we really want the government to control territory because that's how we place more casinos out. And then, as I mentioned in the vocabulary video, according to stacking, we can have up to 2 casinos in each area where we can build. So these places with 1 casino can take a second, and then all these other spaces could accommodate 2 casinos. So that's where you can build one. And then how much do they cost? Well, they cost a lot. They are 5 resources per space where you're putting a casino. Good God. So in every selected space where you're going to build a casino, you have to pay 5 resources per space. And then in each of the spaces, you place a closed casino or you open a casino that's been closed. So this is actually the perfect moment to talk about casinos and a special rule for them with the Syndicate. So bases can be removed through attacks and assaults. Casinos cannot. Casinos can only ever be closed and then you just reopen them. It's expensive, but nobody can ever actually take your casino discs away once they're on the board except for you. They can only suppress so much activity around them that the casinos are forced to close. So again, your goal here, right, is to have more than 7 open casinos. So you need to get your casinos out and you need to get or keep them open. And construct is an action that's going to let you do that. All right, so then we're going to talk about special activities. So everybody gets their own little special activities, but the casinos are pretty fun. One is called Profit, and this is where we're going to talk about all this delicious cash over here. So why would you do Profit? You do Profit as a special activity in order to stack one of these cash tokens out on the map, hopefully to use it later yourself and not get stolen by somebody else. So you can stack cash in any space that has an open casino because basically you're laundering money and you need resources in the area to keep laundering more money. There are some limitations, so you can only do this as a special activity if you've rallied, marched, or constructed on this turn. You cannot pair Profit with Terrorism. No. You already did enough bad things this turn, if that's what you chose to do. So the way this works is that you can place cash with any Syndicate Guerrilla or government cube, so you can actually give some money to your ostensible ally, the government. You're bribing, paying people off. And you can do this in each of 1 or 2 spaces with an open casino. So in this case, we don't have any friendly units here, so we would just have to do it up here in Havana. But that's how you get cash out. However, your other option does not involve placing a cash token out. Instead, it lets you liquidate your cash to get some resources back on your resource meter. So you can also, instead of giving cash tokens out to pieces on the board, you can close any open casinos for 3 resources each. So I could just close these and get a bunch of money all of a sudden. Of course, I'd have to open them later. Maybe right now, though, it's worth it to get some money. And then I can also remove any owned cash from the board and take that for 3 resources each. So ownership is key here. That's why you have to be careful about who you give your cash to. In order to own the cash, I need one of my gorillas to have it. Otherwise, the government owns the cash. But if there's cash that I own that's out on the board, I can close casinos and I can pull my cash tokens back for 3 resources each to make some money. So you can basically put cash out and call it back to yourself in order to gain resources. This is maybe a good moment to talk about cash in general. So there's a hard limit of 4 cash. There's a couple extra cash tokens in the box. They are indeed extras. This is the number of spaces that limits the amount of cash you're allowed to have. So basically on the board, cash needs to be placed with and it moves with a gorilla or a cube. One piece can have multiple stacks of cash, but again, cash has to be assigned to someone and it stays with them as they travel. The faction whose piece holds cash is the faction that owns the cash. So when I put cash out, I can originally put it with a government cube, but that means the government controls the cash. I would have to put it with one of my own gorillas in order to liquidate it for myself later. The owner of the cash is able to transfer that cash to any other piece in the same space at any time. So you can always give it to somebody else, including somebody from another faction if for some reason that's what you choose to do. And if a piece holding cash is removed, then they have to immediately transfer or remove that cash. Usually you have a choice. However, if you get assaulted and there's an option for that other faction to seize your cash, then they get the cash. So don't just be leaving exposed pieces holding cash out for too long because somebody will 100% come and assault you and take that money. If you have cash out here and you're not going to choose to use it to take profit, then one thing that it can do is extend your turn a little bit. So if you're executing an operation without a special activity, but your faction has cash, then you can choose to remove and spend that cash for a free extra limited operation in basically any area on the board. So cash can be liquidated to increase resources, but it can also be spent to perform an extra limited operation. And then in the resource phase, all cash gets removed, and then the faction that holds the cash gets to either take a free base or open a casino, or they get 6 resources. So basically having cash is really good no matter how you use it. However, because it can be really good for everybody at various points, you're going to have to fight to hold on to it. The second special activity that the Syndicate can do is called muscle. So why would you muscle? Muscling is moving government forces to protect syndicate property. I think this is so funny. Basically, because you're in kind of a weird relationship with the government, you can move government pieces to protect syndicate stuff. So where can you muscle? You can either do it in a space that has an open casino or an economic center. And it is limited according to what operation you took this turn. So it can only accompany rally, construct, or march operations. Again, you do terrorism, no muscle for you. But basically it lets you move government pieces from any location on the map to the destination space that you chose. So it's 1 or 2 police that you can move if you're moving to a city, or it's 1 or 2 troops if you're in a province or an EC. So basically, I can drag troops here to protect my casino, and I don't have to use my own pieces. I can use government pieces to do it. That's why the Syndicate has fewer guerrillas. It's because they have the ability to commandeer government pieces as well, so they don't need as many guerrillas. And then our other option is to bribe. So why would you bribe? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Within the game, you're trying to neutralize other factions' units, and you're trying to hide your own guerrillas. You can do this in any one space. And interestingly, most special activities are free, including the other Syndicate special activities we've talked about. So you can do a profit action or you can muscle for free. A bribe costs money. It costs 3 resources to bribe. But what it lets you do is it lets you remove up to 2 cubes, or remove or flip up to 2 guerrillas, or remove an enemy base from a space where you paid that money. And the other thing that makes bribe really interesting is it lets you remove a protected base. So when we talk about bases, normally I could not do anything to this base until both of these guerrillas had been exposed and removed. But if I bribe, then I could actually get at that base without having to get to the guerrillas first. Yikes. But you do have to pay for it, so that's why it's a very expensive special action. And those are all of your options as the Syndicate. So for your main operations, you can rally, so add people to the board or hide guerrillas. You can march, which lets you move your forces around. You can perform terrorism, which impacts support or opposition in an area. And you can construct, which means that you're building new casinos. For your special activities, you're able to profit, which means that you can do things like put some cash with a friendly unit of some kind. Or you can choose to liquidate that cash to get some resources. You can muscle, which means that you can move government forces to protect Syndicate property across the map, which is hilarious to me. Or you can bribe, and basically that allows you to pay some money to remove other people's pieces from an area, which means that even though the Syndicate doesn't necessarily have large forces, they do have a special activity that costs money, but that does help them get control of areas long enough to perhaps build a casino. So that's the Syndicate. I find them very fun to play because, who doesn't want to be a bunch of gangsters? So hopefully this video will help you feel confident playing them, and you'll give it a try in your next game of Cuba Libre. So thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment. Look out for the other faction videos because I'm making one for each faction in this game. And most of all, happy gaming.